And we're back. So today we're going to swap out the choppers on the Thunderbolt. Currently we have the 4.5 in currently, as you can see, and here that clicking you're hearing is not the chopper scraping, that is just the commutator not being fully round anymore. So, just happens with old motors that have commutators, and eventually I'll get the commutator turned on both of my motors and get them undercut. So today we're going to swap out both of the choppers, and we're going to put the 1000 back in. I'm also going to give some motor tips, some Thunderbolt motor tips for you guys to learn. So to get started, if you're wanting to swap out your chopper on your Thunderbolt, or take it out for that matter, out of the Thunderbolt, you're going to need two tools, and they're both Allen wrenches. So for the bolts that cinch down the chopper into the tube, you're going to need a 3/16 Allen wrench. And then for the horn bolts, you're going to need a 1/4. In this case, this one looks kind of special. This one goes onto a ratchet, which, if you can find one of those, which those can be pretty cheap, those are pretty good to have, especially for both, but unfortunately the 3/16 for my ratchet broke. So, those are the two tools you're really going to need to take both things out. Now, the order you want to do this in is you want to take these bolts out on the horn first. So we're going to set this to loosen. The reason why you want to take the horn bolts out first is because of the weight distribution. So if you keep these in, this will stay straight and it won't be kind of collywampus when, if you were to take these out first and leave these in, you know, so it wouldn't be kind of tilted, and it doesn't make it as hard to take these bolts out of the horn first. Kind of makes it a little bit easier on you. That's just how I do it anyway. So you don't have to get them all the way loose most times, depending how good your threads are. If your threads aren't terribly great, then you could probably loosen them all the way, but the way you want to loosen anything in this case, whether that's the horn or anything in that matter, you kind of want to do it in a star pattern. So if you notice how I did this bolt first and I came over here and did the top one, you do it in a star pattern. Once you do the top one, you do the same side on the bottom, and then you come over here and do this one. And now the horn is loose. And now I can put this down. I can now loosen all of these out just by hand. I'm going to put these over here. Now, once you got all of these bolts taken out, it'll kind of sway a little bit. Don't worry about that. I mean, just be kind of careful, but don't entirely worry about this, because I mean, the support beam is holding this up. As long as your support beam is structurally sound and not full of rust holes, it should be okay. So, in my case, unfortunately, even though this is a newer gasket, didn't use the best material and it is already broken, so I already have to take this out. But usually you don't have to follow that step, is to take a piece of your gasket out so it doesn't fall somewhere. So now, what you want to do, like I said earlier, so after the horn bolts, like I said earlier, star pattern on bolts. So you want to start with whichever one, doesn't matter. I'm going to start with this one over here. We're now loosening the bolts on the chopper cap. Let's cinch it down to the chopper tube. So I've loosened that one, so now we'll come over here and we will loosen this one. Do it in a star pattern. That kind of like evenly distributes the torque, like the pressure down onto it. Kind of can prevent warping things or something weird with the metal happening. So, kind of prevents that. And since this is a brass cap, I know a lot of later Thunderbolts, like into the A2 series, stopped using brass and used aluminum. Brass is a very soft metal, and that is the last thing you want to work. So, alright, so now that I've done this, and I came over here and did this one, I'm going to come over here and loosen the last one up. And now I got the first one out. Now that you've got all of your bolts all out, it's ready to come out. But before you even think of taking this out, put gloves on first. As long as they are safety gloves, like you would work on something, kind of like these. You can buy these cheap. They're just called Maximum Safety. I got these from a gas station. They're actually really good. They were $6, but they actually have served me pretty well. So now, I'm not a very tough person, but these things are in here pretty tight. And the reason why is because of that O-ring gasket that goes on the top around here and cinches it around a lip in the chopper tube. This prevents an air leak. But sometimes you can shake it back and forth, kind of making a star pattern almost. And sometimes it helps, but sometimes if that doesn't even help, you just gotta have brute strength to get it out. I felt it loosen. Oh, wow. That is in there. I'm gonna have a hernia by the time I'm done with this. Oh. Yeah, she's in there. That's the tightest I've ever seen it in there. Whew. I'll come back after I get it out. So now once you've loosened it, and gone through all of that to get it loose, you just carefully take it out. Be sure to lift up quite a bit so you don't scratch your paint. Now I'm going to come over here and set it down, just on the chair. Oops! I ripped my chair, but that's okay, it's a work chair. So as you can see, your other choppers, side to side. Looking pretty good. The yellow one, again, is the 4-5, and the white is the single tone 5-4. So, a couple motor tips here to kind of learn. If you're ever working on one and you want to kind of spiffy up the motor that you have, like get some new parts. So something to learn, we're going to use the 1000 right here as an example, so I'm going to move this over. So, as you can see on the commutator, I don't know how well you can see that, kind of a uneven brush pattern there. While yes, this commutator does need to be turned like that one over there, however, I don't know how well you can see it, the brush pattern is a little more even. There is a burn mark right there. That's just because, again, this thing needs to be turned. That, or who knows, there could be a burnt through wire, or there's a short somewhere, but the motor works great and it's a healthy one regardless. So anyways, back to 1000 motor here. If you notice that there's an uneven brush pattern, if you ever clean the commutator on your Thunderbolt and leave the original brushes in, throw them back in, and you notice this pattern, your brushes are extremely worn down and they need to be replaced. As an example, if I can loosen one of the brush caps here. I'm having a tough time with loosening things today. Let me get one of my gloves on here so I don't screw up my skin here. Let's see if we can do it now. Oh, there we go. Went. Notice how most times with brush motors, this applies to any brush motor, most times these will have tension come out. These did not. And if that ever happens, it's not because the spring's worn out. Your brushes need to be replaced. That is very worn down. And the reason why it needs a lot of tension on the commutator is so it can perfectly make contact with the commutator. And the problem with that is, if it doesn't make enough contact and doesn't have enough tension onto that commutator, it isn't going to run as well, and the motor's going to work harder, which in turn will kill the motor over time. And that will also put a lot of heat into your commutator and will also make it to the point where it won't be a true circle anymore, or known as true. And that's where your clicking comes from over time. So, if you ever run into that problem, replace your brushes immediately. In my case, I cannot do that right now. They still work fine, but they are on their way out, and I need to replace them. And eventually, I will do a video on how to replace brushes and properly seat them. But for now, if you ever notice that and your brushes don't have a lot of tension coming out, it's not because the spring is worn out, it's because your commutator brushes are extremely worn down and they need to be replaced. So, I thought I would just throw that little tip in there. So now, once you've gotten your other motor out, you can now get your motor of choice, whatever port ratio that being. And you want to be really careful. Again, have your gloves on. You want to flip it over to a point where you can get it in there. And make sure, if you have a cart like mine, make sure your footing is really good, because you can become very unevenly distributed and you can fall over. Now once you've easily aligned it and got it in, throw her down, but be gentle. And then you want to scoot it around and make sure all 4 holes are aligned here. And so, all holes are aligned and we're ready to go. So now, we want to get our 3/16 and 1/4 Allen wrench. We want to get those bolts we had. We want to start the inverse. Instead of putting the horn bolts in first, we put the chopper cap tube bolts in. Again, because of weight distribution and how it kind of goes in. Because, I mean, it wouldn't really make sense to put the horn bolts in first, because then your chopper may kind of go forward a little bit and your holes won't get lined. So, again, now, like with loosening I had mentioned earlier, you want to put the screws in as a star pattern. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of throw them in, not tighten them down just yet. We're just going to throw them in here. Sure, that's good enough. Alright, so now you want to start a star pattern of tightening it down. And with tightening it down, like the first screw, do not tighten it down all the way. Kind of just get it to where it's just a little tight. Then, go across from it and do the other bolt. Again, now tighten it just a little more than the last one, so you can kind of get it in there with that O-ring around it. Now come back over here, do the other one. Kind of tighten it down until because I'm trying to avoid scratching the paint. Until it is fully tightened. When we come back over here, do the other one. Tighten it all the way down. So now, 2 bolts across from each other are tightened down. Do the same thing for the other ones as well. We're going to do this one. Tighten that down. Since now the chopper cap is now mated with the O-ring, you can go ahead and tighten this one down too. Be sure to be careful not to strip your Allen wrench out. I've done that a couple times and it's not very fun, to say the least. So now once you've got all 4 bolts tightened down, make sure to kind of go around the star pattern, make sure they are tightened. And be careful not to over tighten them. Okay. Right. And let's tape. Alright, a little test I like to do myself before I put anything back together is I like to test the chopper and make sure those brushes are seated perfectly. The chopper works. Alright, so now we can proceed with putting the horn bolts in. Again, you want to do a star pattern. So you can evenly distribute. So you kind of want to align the horn with one of your holes and run the screw in just a little. Come on the other side and do the same, but you kind of got to move the horn around just a little bit to align with the other hole and run the screw in. Now our horn is aligned for the other 2 screws to go in. Throw it in here, and then throw the other one. Sometimes you gotta just kind of gently move the horn around a little bit to get it perfectly aligned. Some dirt down there. Now we're gonna set this to tighten. We're going to tighten it down in a star pattern. Tighten it down in a star pattern. Here, so we're going to start this one, tighten that one down, not all the way, just a little, and come over here, and do the same. There we go. And then with this one, tighten that one in, and we'll come back over here and do our last one. Tighten that down. Now, just like with the chopper tube bolts, you want to go around and make sure all of them are tight. Be sure not to strip your Allen wrench out, do the star pattern. Tight. Tight. And that is tight. And after you're done, you completely have your chopper back in and ready to go for service. So I hope this video was helpful for some that have a Thunderbolt and want to swap out chopper motors, and for some motor tips. Thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate it.